Welcome to the presentation of the Niagara Falls Poetry Project, Recovery, Preservation and Interpretation of Poetry of a Particular Place, originally presented to the Popular Culture Association 2022 National Conference on April 13th, 2022. The Niagara Falls Poetry Project is a research creation, co-creation, and participatory design project started in the late 1990s when I came across a poem in a conference proceedings book and realized that no one would be looking for Poetry of Niagara Falls would likely find this again. The poem in question was a fragment of a poem. It was unattributed and it was untitled. It wasn't until 2021 that I discovered this was Peter Porter's A Legend of Goat Island, and it was distributed in a chapbook format, and there were only 100 copies printed of it. Now, I just want to do a couple of definitions before we go too far. This is a research creation project, and through research creation, something new is added to the world. And research creation theses or projects typically integrate a creative process, experimental aesthetic component, or an artistic work as an integral part of the study. Topics are selected and investigated that could not be addressed without engaging in some form of creative practice, such as the production of a video, performance, film, sound work, blog or multimedia text, or website. And the theoretical, technical, and creative aspects of a research creation project are pursued in tandem. Now, there are a number of techniques and theories that I use for this project. One of them is co-creation, and this is creation, for example, between the poets and the artists and myself. It was also a participatory design project. It involves crowdsourcing quite a bit because I do get submissions from other researchers who know what I'm doing, or people who just run across the site and would like a poem of their own or one they know of to be added. In addition, when I was doing the walking tour of Niagara Falls, I ended up doing an event using crowdsourcing and a modified Delphi method of consensus building in order to select the poems that will be on the walking tour. As each poem is added, I do a content analysis of the poem to decide what subject tags to include in it. And also, I do a close reading of the poem to, just look at the what's in there and, other things I can put about the poem. Now, the purpose of the Niagara Falls Poetry Project is that it's a repository of poems about Niagara Falls by poets, both living and dead. It's a site to showcase Niagara Falls poets who are writing on any topic. It's a site for researchers and academics to easily find critical and popular writings about Niagara Falls literature. And it's a site to introduce visitors, locals, and poetry aficionados to Niagara Falls poetry, history, and artworks. And more about this can be read in my MA project write-up, which is available in the bibliography at the end of this presentation. And what is the Niagara Falls Poetry Project? Overall, it's an online subject anthology with poetry, Niagara Falls, and poems of place being the major subjects. And one of the things about anthologies is that they prompt canon formation and they invite prolonged study. Now, at the same time, this is also a site of recovery, discovery, rediscovery, and disruption. Poetry, for example, is often published in chapbooks, journals, newspapers, newsletters, commemorative programs, and blogs, and they get lost. They publish a chapbook, there's only 50 copies done, and 30 years from now, the copies are not available anymore. So it helps to rediscover these and helps people who aren't familiar with it discover them for the first time. And it disrupts the established literary canon. It's not a best of or critical interpretation site. So the canon includes the things that are in anthologies already. So, and they're often the pretty poems. So in Longfellow's Poems of Place and Pritchard's Poems of Niagara, um, they're, the poems tend to be positive, oftentimes very quite literary, not always though. And this site includes a lot of things that are um, not quite as pretty. For example, there's a poem on the site about a fellow and his mother who were both raped at different times in Niagara Falls, and it's a very raw poem, um, and things about Love Canal, for example, the tremendous environmental disaster in Niagara Falls, New York, poems about that on the site. So in addition to the natural area, it explores the history, culture, and social aspects of Niagara Falls, which may be reflected in all forms of poetry, be it good, bad, or indifferent. When the city of Niagara Falls, Ontario, was updating its coat of arms and flag and the motto, the Herald of Canada went through the site and found a line in a poem that's not very literary, but it talked about the, the lasting waters of peace connecting the two countries. So he used that for the motto. There are different components to the Niagara Falls Poetry Project website project. One of them is a website. This is the major one. This is one I started with. And each poem that I have included on the website is listed here. And I've done the poem itself, and also each one has some sort of illustration. In this case, it's a photograph of the author. Quite often it's a picture or painting of Niagara Falls or that type of thing. And one of the reasons for this is also to add more interest to it, but it also helps with the search engine optimization of the site because the image also has image attributes that the search engine can find and match up with the other one. So it gives it a stronger presence when people are doing a search on Niagara Falls poetry. I just mentioned Lydia Huntley Sigourney has 3 poems of Niagara Falls on the site at the moment, and she was a very well-known mid-19th century poet, and she also compiled quite a few anthologies of poetry of all type, and the Niagara Falls poetry canon can often be found within her anthologies. So I just want to point out a couple of things about the website itself. This one is called The Bridge Builder, Maxine Cunningham. Again, another artwork here that illustrates the poem that is being done. So the menus along the top where the red circle just came, there's a section about the Niagara Falls Poetry Project and what is involved in it. There's an author search section. This one has just an alphabetical listing of authors, but it's also got a separate section of authors of the Niagara region, so that you can click on that, you can see local authors as well. And they go back, they're not necessarily living, they might be 19th century or earlier as well. There's a straight title search on it. There's a Niagara Falls poetry map, which I'll come back to in a couple of minutes. And Niagara History and Folklore section, this one is very much under construction. When I know something about an event or a place an event took place, I've added it to the post for the poem itself to give some context to it and illustrate it. But I'm finding that more and more often I'm getting more than one poem on a particular event or whatnot. So I'm putting them on these pages, and then I'm linking back to the poem, from the poem to this page, and then back to the poem. And I also list all the poems on that particular subject on that page as well. I've also got a bibliography and criticism. So here, for example, I've listed a lot of the anthologies that are available, and other sort of miscellaneous things about Niagara literature that might have come up. So there's a section on quotes using Niagara, for example. So if there's just a throwaway one line, you know, this is like a Niagara streaming over the edge of the cliff. I've included that. It's not a poem as such about Niagara Falls itself, but it does mention Niagara Falls, so I've got a number of things like that in it. In addition here, there is, I developed the poetry walking tour of Niagara Falls. There's a link to it on the main page. It goes out to another site. I'll come back to this in a minute as well. Now, another component of the Niagara Falls Poetry Project is publications. So, for example, I have the day I retired from my job as the librarian at the Niagara Falls Public Library, I published this book, Niagara Mornings. It is primarily a photography book. I took a photograph every day for a year from the same spot and the same time of day from showing Niagara Falls. And so this was compiled into a small book, and I took some of the literary canon of Niagara Falls and included them to illustrate these. I've also done magazine and newspaper articles. Up here, this is, I've mentioned the development of the poetry walking tour of Niagara Falls. So when I did my MA, there was a report done on it. This is deposited at the Brock University Library, and there's a link to it at the end of this presentation. I'm currently working on a book called An Incomplete and Non-Chronological History of Niagara Falls Through Poetry and Images, which is fairly self-explanatory. And who knows when it's going to be out, if ever, but it is one of the components of the project. I've also done a number of presentations to conferences and done readings and presentations at the museum and the library. Have visited classes, like for example at Niagara University, I've got into their course that studies Niagara literature. So whatever is available, I will come out and talk about Niagara poetry. Another component is that I've mentioned before is a poetry walking tour of Niagara Falls. So the process for this is what happens is I've taken the text of a poem from the book, put it onto the website. So this is the same poem that's on the website as was in the book. And then when I did this poetry walking tour, I added it to the walking tour. So the poem is actually on the walking tour. And the tour itself is 4.5 kilometers from Dufferin Islands, just above Niagara Falls, to the Rainbow Bridge just below Niagara Falls. And there's about 25 different points of interest along there. This happens to be one of them. This is right at the very brink of the falls. There's a plaque there to Jose Maria Heredia. It was presented by the Boy Scouts of Cuba when there was an international jamboree held in Niagara Lake in 1955. So this plaque is there. And so as you walk along, you can see on your phone or your tablet a picture of the plaque. You can read the poem. This one actually has an audio version of it as well, so you could listen to it. And then there's information about it. So I'm mentioning the Boy Scouts tribute is on there as well. Another component of the project is the poetry map of Niagara Falls. So when you click on this link initially, you get this overview map. Each of these little red icons represents a point where there is at least one poem there. Oftentimes there are more than that. So when you click on one of the links, for example down here, The first stunter in Niagara Falls was Sam Patch back in, I think, 1829. And uh, so when you click on this window opens up. I've put in a picture of his contraption with, I believe, him standing on the top of it. Um, and this is what he jumped from. And the, the banks at both sides of the falls were filled with people that he had some friends collecting money from to make some money from his stunt. And he jumped into the river several times from this contraption, got money there. So I have a little bit of information about him here. I have the full text of the poem down here, and a link to the poem on the website. Now, on places where there are more than one poem, after the poem that's in full text underneath it, there are links to the other poems that relate to that point as well, so you can spend some time doing it. Incidentally, Sam Patch died shortly after this when he jumped into the Genesee River when he was drunk, and his body wasn't found for several months later. But anyway, um, so the next component that I want to talk about is the social media sites. So on Twitter and Facebook, I have sites with a handle at Niagara Poetry. I don't post every poem I put on, but when I try and post fairly often. But if I have a shorter poem, I'll put the whole text of the poem on here and also link to the site from here. And if it's some sort of event or in a place where a lot of things happen, I will post links to this, for example, in Facebook groups. There's 6 or 7 Facebook groups dealing with Niagara Falls, and so I'll put them on there, and I can always tell after I've done that because my stats go way up. A normal day will see about 20 to 30 people who have visited the website, but when I've put in, it could jump as high as several hundred. Depending on what the topic is. So I always know that. And usually I try and, get people to click like or whatever so they'll be notified about it at future points. All right, so this project is discovering, adding a showcase of Niagara poetry. So there is a preservation component to it. I'm bringing out things that other people might not find if it's written in a newspaper in the 1820s. It's really difficult to find that stuff without going through. So I'm bringing it, making it easier to aspect. But the site itself needs preserving as well, so that when I kick off, it's still around, people can still use it. But to deal with this, UNESCO in 2003 wrote a charter on the preservation of the digital heritage. And relating to this site, a couple of things. They said measures should be taken to urge creators to cooperate with national libraries, archives, and others in preserving the digital heritage. And they should encourage universities and other research organizations to ensure preservation. So, in line with that, steps I've taken to preserve this particular website, there is regular archiving by the Wayback Machine, which has been saved 134 times so far. Now, they do it automatically, but you can also give them a form asking them to do it on a regular basis to make sure that your site is preserved as you want it to. In addition, my heirs and executors are aware of the project and my intentions for it after I kick off. And it is written into my will that it's going to Brock University to transfer to their website, and instructions have been given for the use of it, should anyone wish to continue adding to it at some point in the future. Otherwise, it will just remain a static site there. Now, to find the poems, gets more difficult. The low-hanging fruit to start with is various anthologies that already have them in with the established canon. The Now anthology also includes a bibliography, so not all the poems that he has in there are full text, but there is a bibliography. So, been tracking those down over the years. I'm not finished because some of them are in very obscure publications that I haven't been able to find copies of, where they're housed using interlibrary loan and the national libraries and things like that. So I'm still working on some of those. In addition, I do regular internet searches. I have alerts set up for in Google so that if the word Niagara and poem or poetry appear in some sort of new blog post or newspaper article or whatever, it will let me know. So every time I post something to the website, I get an alert from Google telling me that I've posted something to the website. So, so it's nice to know that Google is right up to date in indexing the site. There's a lot of online databases that I use, so the Literature Online, Canadiana Online. There are indices like Granger's and the Index to American Periodical Verse, newspaper archives. Word of mouth is very important, so when I go to poetry reading and get my card out, people can submit their own work or suggest works of other people type of thing. And author submissions as a contact forum and links from other websites that authors can contact me and get their poems on the site. I mentioned earlier doing content analysis of the poems. So as I'm doing that, I'm adding subjects to the tag tree. And so you can click on any one of these and see all the poems related to them on the site. So daredevils and stunters are big ones. Romance, suicide and death are also big draws for people writing poetry. So you can just click on these. There's also a search box, so you can just put in your own search term and see what comes up and get a list of them. So future directions of the project. I already mentioned the history of Niagara Falls through poetry and images that I'm working on. I'm also working on a book interpreting images through limericks and short explanatory text. So there's a lot of really good, interesting images out there, but there's no poem that sort of illustrates that. So I am writing limericks for that with a short text. So some of them, not very many of them, but some of them appear on the site already. But I will be intending to publish that as a small book in the future. On the website, I'm adding a timeline of Niagara Falls poetry to the site, and I'm adding galleries of photographs, artworks, and sculptures. So each of the poems has the illustration. So I'm making a gallery of those, and they're being linked back to the poem that they were originally illustrated. So here's the bibliography of things I've mentioned in this presentation, and poems that I've cited in this presentation. I haven't necessarily mentioned them all, but they've been on the slides. So thank you very much for watching this presentation. Please feel free to contact me, and thank you very much again.